Good morning and welcome to our HR training in regards to performance evaluation this year. We thank you all for being here today. I don't know about you, but I have a perfect view out my window of some fogginess and frost all over the houses next to me. So I'm glad to be doing this inside and in my home. It's cool to watch you guys type in some of your answers for your traditions, the movies, the desserts you guys make. It's cool to have those traditions. Hope you'll take some time this holiday to continue those traditions and spend some time with your family. By way of introduction, my name is Abel Johnson. I work here on the growth team within Human Resources. I see a lot of familiar faces as I scroll on the camera today, and I've worked with many of you while I was on the talent acquisition welcome team. So I'm glad to still be here and be part of our team in HR. Also alongside me, co-hosting and facilitating today is Kyle Galloway, and I'll let him do a quick introduction as well.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Excited to be here with you all today. One of the newest members to Boise State's Human Resources team. I have been employed with BSU for about 6 weeks now, so excited to be here and ready to facilitate with my co-host Abel. So welcome all.
Thank you, Kyle. We're really excited to have Kyle with us. He brings a lot of good experience, and he's also fun to be around. So glad to have him here with me, helping with the training. So just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. Many of you in this training, this is kind of part one of 2 series of trainings that we've done a little bit different this year. This training is more around how to have the discussion and the evaluation discussion with your employees. And we also have another online training that we have sent out through emails, but also it's on our HR website, and that is how to fill out the evaluation form. So we won't really be discussing the logistics of the form here in this training format, but there is an online e-learning module that you can take at your own pace, you can pause it and rewind it and watch it again. And it answers a lot of those questions on how to fill out the form and the criteria and the grading and things like that. So would love to, Tiffany shared that in the chat box. If you haven't seen that on our website, it is there for your reference. Please use it. And we hope that's going to be valuable this year. A couple other things. This session is being recorded. A couple things for that. The reason for that is we will be sending out an email recap after our session today within a day or two. And we will be sending this recording to all of you and all of those of your colleagues that weren't able to make it to this session because of conflicts of scheduling or whatnot, so they can also participate in the training and use that as a resource later down the road when you go to do your evaluation. And it'll also be on our website as well. So one more thing is, while you're not talking, if you can keep your mics muted just so we don't get all that noise, and we'll get started. So performance evaluation. This year it's been rather different, difficult for many, and the performance evaluation is another thing to think about as we are entering this time of year of cheerfulness and holiday cheer and joy. A couple of things about the performance evaluation that I really want to point out. This is a great opportunity to reflect back on your employees' accomplishments, talking about the goals that they've met or maybe they haven't met, and also just to be able to offer some recognition and praise, and also just to help with their improvement and feedback. This, for many of us, it's been a very difficult year, if not difficult, different. And when we think about evaluations this year, as you can tell from our slide deck title, there's a couple of things we really want to focus on. And that focus is on empathy and also compassion and kindness. As we think about evaluations this year, it's going to be more flexible. Flexibility is going to be key there as we talk about what our accomplishments were this year and how COVID has kind of inserted itself into our lives. So it's going to be a little bit different. So also, your primary goal as supervisors is really to help your employees, right? Is to help them perform their jobs, help them meet those expectations that you've set and that the job is set, but also to help develop them as a person, as an employee, as an individual. And so we all know that this takes time as a supervisor and a time commitment from you, but we know that by doing that, your employees are going to be a lot happier and more engaged at work. And, it's like anything else, anything you put into it, you'll get out of it in terms of investment. So we really praise your time today to come here. And we really hope that you'll take some time this year to have those discussions and do your evaluations with empathy in mind. And so we'll jump right into the topics today, and we'll let Kyle introduce those topics today.
Absolutely. So really, today's topics, we want to focus on understanding the challenges of 2020 and what it's brought us. I think like Abel said earlier, if it hasn't been difficult, it's definitely been different. It's been challenging. So we're going to kind of go over a little bit of 2020 and what it's caused us to change, not only as, our personal lives, but, how we operate as a whole with work. And showing why empathy is important, really more now than ever, and how it aligns with our HR people strategy. So we're going to touch base on that. We're going to discuss how to have the conversation regarding performance evaluations and what that tone sounds like this year, because it should be a little bit different, and we'll explain why a little bit later on. And really some things to discuss and be mindful of, approved leaves and other accommodations that may have gone out throughout the year. So we're gonna make sure we touch base on that. And we'll have some time to answer some of your pre-submitted questions. And we will leave time at the end of the presentation for you guys to unmic and ask questions, or feel free to ask questions in the box. And we will also touch base a little bit on what's to come next year and evaluations and what that change may look like for BSC moving forward. So Abel is our project lead on that, and we'll be able to fill you in now on kind of what to expect here in the next 12 to 13 months. And as we transition to the next slide, in the chat box, describe, managing your team during COVID-19 if you can. Abel, do you want to elaborate?
Yeah, so this is kind of just a fun activity as we think about, COVID world and how all of our worlds have changed, especially, when we talk about managers managing their employees. In one word or less, what is something that, how would you describe managing your team in COVID-19 world, work from home world versus, before when we were all in the office? And, take just 60 seconds if you could. We'll read those as they come in. Exciting. Thank you, Shelly. Emotional. Jen. Yeah, for sure. Flying on the trapeze. Teamwork. I like that. Teamwork. That's a positive, right? Actually. And I like that. Flexibility. Exactly. These are some of your words that we're capturing are in this thought bubble on the slide. And, it's really neat to hear your input and thoughts, because as we work in HR in our own team, and Tiffany being our fearless leader has done a great job. But, some of the things that come from our remote world are actually positive, right? Sometimes we actually collaborate more because we aren't around each other as much. So maybe teamwork has increased for you. It's been challenging, but it's also been a growing opportunity. And maybe you as a manager or as an employee has found that there's some things that you like and dislike, and you've been able to kind of find yourself a little bit more and figure out what works for you and maybe what doesn't. And so I think even though it's been challenging, it's been kind of an insight. It's a learning opportunity. And so it's just kind of cool to have your feedback. I appreciate all of your feedback. So let's go right into 2020, and we'll talk a little bit about empathy and how we've moved forward in this remote world of empathy 2020 and evaluations. And I'll kick that back over to Kyle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Abel. There's no question that 2020 has been an unprecedented year for us all. It's definitely different. As a university, we've had drastic changes with quickly transitioning some of our jobs and or services to a virtual setting. We've adapted the work environment to provide social distancing for roles that can't be performed virtually. We're supporting employees through unexpected challenges that they are facing at home, such as virtual school. I'm going through that myself with my kids. COVID-19 related concerns or diagnosis, and many more. Currently, over 50 million people worldwide have been affected with COVID-19. So when you think about what's been challenging for you as a manager, those same challenges and or concerns are also being faced by your employees or staff members. Our lives have changed along with our work. Most social gatherings have been limited, and we'll explain a little bit later on how this could affect work. So there are a couple of things to think of, prior to your evaluation with your employee or staff members. Does your employee know what's expected of them? Have you set clear expectations with your employee or staff member? With most employees or staff members working in a remote setting or some kind of modified schedule, it can be difficult to have metrics on an employee or staff member's performance if the expectations weren't clear post COVID-19. Some of your employees or staff members may have never left, as they may be essential to the business. Is it possible they have faced similar challenges as those who are working in a remote setting? Maybe walk-in traffic in the department has decreased, so it's possible that tasks or duties may have been affected along with those changes as well. So I think the answer is yes. Because this year has been so different, we believe empathy should play a part in the evaluation theme this year. And the next section is going to be kind of the meat of our presentation today, and we're going to explain why empathy is really the key theme moving forward as we conduct our evaluations here the next couple of months.
Yeah, great intro. So, it's nice to be here today. I feel like I'm getting some interaction for the first time in months. I'm looking out at faces here, Michelle, Armstrong, Laura, Matthews, Troy, all you guys. And I have fond memories of talking with all of you over the last 3 years. And I've come to realize that work is very important. It's a means to an end for some of us for a paycheck. But it's also, I love my job and I love the people I work with because of all of you and all the things and how we have built our relationships. And a lot of that's grounded in empathy and just talking with each other and building those relationships over time. So what is empathy? We can go to the Webster dictionary and define it. Empathy is understanding the feelings of another. Okay, that's straightforward, but also, very open. So let me give you a better definition of one that I like. Many of you, I'm sure, have heard of Simon Sinek. He's got a great video on empathy, and I would love to share that with you, the full video, if you're interested in watching that at a different time. But he says empathy is being concerned about the human being, not just their output. Now, how does that apply to what we're in now with performance evaluation? I'm not saying that the output is not important, right? Because the output is important. There is a job to do. We all have jobs. We're all being paid to do that. But more than ever during this COVID situation and us moving to a remote world and a lot of unknowns in the world and our state and our campus, COVID, health, there's more at stake than just their output now. It's more about humans, right? It's more about us. And so we need to really keep that in mind. I think that's a very important lens to have as you go to mark those evaluations, right? And so we'll talk a little bit about what that means and give you some examples, real life examples of how we apply that knowledge. Leadership is important right now, and it's key. And a lot of you are great leaders. A lot of you are leaders to many people, whether you know it or not, whether they're in your care or not. And leadership is about empathy. It's about having the ability to relate to and connect with people for the purpose of inspiring and empowering their lives. And in HR, we have some great leaders. Many of you have worked with them, and I'm sure you would agree. And it's less because of, what they lead and more about how they lead. And I think all of us appreciate that in a leader. So empathy should be the focus for 2020 in evaluation. We'll explain how you can apply that in those discussions and give you some real life examples. And then we'll also offer some time for you guys to give your input, which we would love to hear as well. So managers, middle managers, and most managers who manage people, and Simon has said this too, is one of the hardest roles, but most fulfilling roles that you can do. And you're in a position right now to really understand the needs of your employee, their fears, their wants, their struggles. Sometimes they've shared a lot with you on one-on-one settings. And sometimes that all comes out in the evaluation. Sometimes it's during the middle of the year or just in the hallway, or, hey, I need to talk to you, knock on your door. And so you have a great opportunity to be able to listen to your employees and understand what they want and what they're fearful of. And it seems like in this COVID world, remote world, at least from our perspective, that's increased, right? because there's a lot at stake and there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of unknowns. And so all of that's coming up to the surface in our employees. And so there's a lot that they're worrying about. Again, we've said this many times, it's been a rough year, but your tone and approach should be one of compassion and kindness. Using language that truly shows you and shows them that you understand their concerns, and that maybe they didn't get their projects done on time, but maybe discussing why. Did it have to do with COVID? Was there something that was out of their control, right? As many of us have experienced. And empathy, and I want to put an asterisk next to this slide and what I'm saying. Empathy is not necessarily giving them a free pass for 2020. That's not what we're saying. But being mindful of the struggles that they are facing during this pandemic, and considering what effective performance really means in light of what has happened this year and since the beginning of the pandemic. So our expectations being set since COVID-19. Have you had a discussion with them since going remote, saying this is kind of what I expect amidst the pandemic and what's out of our control? And have you set expectations of what's to come in the near future as we continue to work remote? So those are all good questions and things to think about. And then, so I guess the thing is how do we do that, right? And I would say the easiest way is just to have the discussion with your employees, right? On a regular basis, more than just once a year. So hopefully you're doing that. And if you haven't, I would encourage you to try it. And, we have a great leader that does that in a way where, back when we worked at work, it was a walkabout. We would just go out and walk around, and it was just a quick touch base of how are you doing? And not just the output, right? Not just how's that project? Was that going to be done on time? But, how are you doing? How are you feeling? What are your fears? And so those are great examples of showing empathy, but still being productive in those conversations. So as we move from the empathy piece lens, how now do we have the discussion, right? How do we initiate those topics in that conversation, but still baking in the empathy piece? And for that, I'll kick it over to Kyle.
Absolutely. Thanks, Abel. The video, How to Conduct Better Performance Evaluations, Review Conversations, is a great video about having the right conversations with your employees. And it really focuses on the tone and kind of like the body language that we expect all managers to utilize when they're going over performance evaluations. So we're going to play this video for you. It is about 2 minutes long, and we hope you enjoy it.
Conducting the performance review conversation can be challenging, both for you as a leader as well as for the employee. The employee may be concerned that they're going to be sitting in the hot seat and get judged. They might also worry about how the performance appraisal could affect the potential for them to get a raise. You might be concerned that your feedback can cause them to get emotional or defensive or even argumentative. That's why it's really helpful to have a plan in place when going into this conversation. So I'm going to share with you 7 tips to confidently have the performance review conversation. Tip number 1, don't ad lib. Use the forms that have been provided by your company for the performance review conversation. Number 2, make sure your employee gets to prepare the exact same forms so that you can be on the same page and there's no surprises for them. You don't want them to be frustrated when suddenly they feel like they're being judged for something that they just weren't expecting. Number 3, don't just dive in and get to business. Build some rapport. Set the tone by asking them how their week went, thank them for showing up to the meeting, and maybe discuss something like how their family is doing or any vacation plans they might have. Number 4, before you give your feedback, first allow them in each category to tell you how they felt their performance was in the past year. Tell them where you agreed with their performance opinions, and then tell them where you may have differed. This is an important phrase. Instead of saying disagree or allowing room for any kind of argument, just say, I appreciate your feedback on that. I would agree, you did a great job with X, Y, and Z. Where my opinion differs a bit is, and then give the example. Number 6, when giving feedback, make sure you'll use only observable facts, not assumptive judgments. You don't want to say something like, Mike, it really seems like you've checked out and you don't even care anymore this past quarter. Instead, say something like, I've noticed you've been tardy 3 times out of the last 4 weeks. And in most of the meetings in the last 2 weeks, you've really only participated once. What can you tell me about this? This gives them an opportunity to share their side and really explain what might be going on with them. Which leads us to number 7. They may become defensive or argumentative. If so, as challenging as it may be, allow them the time to vent and listen to what they have to say. No need to prescribe an answer, just listen, and if necessary, ask them to share a little bit more. Want an even deeper dive on how to conduct a performance review conversation? Head over to livingasaleader.com/shop and check out our performance management e-learning bundle. In this two-part course, we not only talk about the conversation, but we also discuss how to set goals with your employee and how to coach them throughout the year. For even more tips like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel or go to livingasaleader.com and subscribe to our blog. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, what a great video. The video does a great job at explaining the importance of the tone while going over evaluations. So, a lot of things to remember. Some of the more crucial things to remember is making sure that we have a plan in place before we have the discussion. We're not ad-libbing, we're coming prepared to our meeting. Another key piece that's important is really building the rapport to build up to the conversation. We're using facts, and really that's the most important piece when we're talking about performance management. When we document things, we're using fact-based findings on performance when we're discussing things like that. And like you said in the video, we're allowing employees time to, vent and, convey to you about, how well they did or what they can work on. A lot of times if people are not performing well, they know it. And, we give them time and we just listen at that time. And, that allows you to really, show the empathetic side with your listening skills, right? Some other examples or suggestions you can use part of the conversation with your employees. We like phrase, thank you for your contributions during this difficult time. I think that's important. I appreciate how well you've adjusted during this difficult time. We know this year's been difficult, so let's focus on something that went well. And like you said earlier, I understand this year's been challenging, but here are things that went well, and here are some things we can work on for FY22. So again, we're not coming in a negative tone. We're allowing ourselves as a manager to have an empathetic piece starting off with that builds into the conversation. So your tone and approach have the ability to turn any situation into a more positive outcome. We truly do believe that. And conversations that start off with empathy really give the perception to the employee that you do care. And that's what we want you guys to focus on. Even our difficult employees, we should care for those. And it all starts with the conversation and ensuring that we're building the foundation off that starts off with empathy as you move forward. And the next slide here that we'll touch base on, we'll go over the performance management piece, which is also important as well as you think about goals.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. So very important. As you look at this graphic that's on the slide here, it has a lot of the things that are entailed when it comes to the performance management piece. A lot of things that we've touched on already with Kyle and having the tips, but just making sure that you are meeting regularly. That's a huge one. So often, I was thinking about it this morning that Christmas to my kids, for me, I'm kind of like their supervisor. Well, I am their supervisor, right? But to my kids, Christmas is like performance evaluation. Everything they did right or wrong comes down to, okay, were you good or were you bad this year? Are you going to get coal? Are you going to get presents? And it comes down to one day of year. And so for me, I try to see it as throughout the year, as they do things that are wrong or right, I praise them or I have those discussions in real time, right? Throughout the year. So if my kid expects a gift on Christmas, but he was horrible all year, I didn't tell him, right? And hopefully he knows, but sometimes just having that discussion and meeting regularly with those check-ins throughout the year to really help with that progress and that transparency. It creates trust, right? So that's one of the best tips I can give you. The goal setting and preparation's key as well. Again, goals are important and they matter, but they also need to be adjusted to the current situation and circumstances, especially during the COVID world that we're living in. Discussing positive components of what went well. What are some things that they're working on? What are they excited about? Making sure you're documenting these things, right? Making sure that the documentation and the job plans and expectations are being recorded. There's a quote that says that the pen is quicker than the mind. And sometimes, writing it down and making sure that you're following up with them on your next check-in to say, looks like last time we talked about this, how are you doing on that? And that's just a very powerful thing, because the employee knows that you're remembering what we talked about, you're keeping track, and it kind of holds them accountable as well. Conversation is key, getting feedback from your colleagues, sharing the performance review format, making sure that it's honest and transparent. The video also talked about making sure that they get a copy of, and we do that here at campus, but of what you're going to discuss beforehand, so that they're not thrown off. They know what's going to be discussed in the one-on-one. So these are all great practices and best practices that we would encourage. Taking the time to think about your team's goals. Do your employees know what's expected of them? Do they have the tools to do their job adequately? That's within your control, right? Do you have a way of measuring their performance during this pandemic? And so we wanted to stop right here and solicit some feedback from you guys, from you colleagues and employees. What are some of those roadblocks, if any, that maybe you can foresee or that you already have encountered when it comes to how do I measure their performance during this pandemic? And if you want, throw it in the chat box, or feel free to unmic as well. We have a minute or two here to discuss that, and we'd love to hear any thoughts or feedback, any fears from you guys. And I have my colleagues here helping me monitor the chat box so I don't miss anybody. So what are some roadblocks? How do I measure my performance of my employees during this pandemic, this different world that we're living in? And Tiffany, let me know if I'm missing any of those chats or anything.
Yeah, Abel, you have a chat from Diane, and it's wondering, will the evaluation process be streamlined this year so it takes less supervisor time?
I hope we're talking about, so Diane, we're talking about classified and professional. Is that the colleagues we're talking about? Them. If so, streamlined, the form itself is pretty straightforward. It's not lengthy in regards to when you compare that to some other colleagues of ours, faculty process. Again, we know that it's a time lift for you, but the return on investment is way greater, we feel like. So here's a great example. When we don't do performance evaluation and management correctly, eventually people leave. The cost of refilling that position and recruiting that position with the people on the committee and their salary and time is more than doing a good, effective evaluation up front and throughout the year. And again, those chats don't have to be long. Again, our supervisor has a chat check-in with us, I think weekly or bi-weekly, and it's about 20 minutes. And they're just, how you doing? What do you need from me to be successful? And for me as an employee, oh my gosh, if I have a worry, if I want to take a class, if I want to grow, if I just want to share what's bothering me in the last 2 weeks in a couple of meetings or struggles I'm running into, she's been able to really listen to me. Sometimes she doesn't offer any solution. It's just a good ear to listen to. And so for me as an employee, that helps me feel engaged and know that I'm being cared for, and my manager really cares about what I feel. And that makes me want to stay and makes me want to continue to engage. So I'm not really giving you the answer I think that you're looking for. The form itself and the process itself is pretty straightforward, but the return is greater when you have those discussions up front. And I'm happy to have anybody else jump in. I'm seeing stuff pop up, so I'm trying to monitor that.
And I think able to, for those managers that manage, maybe eight plus people, if you need help with your evaluations, we'll be happy to help pre-fill some of those areas for you. So like the name and PCN number and, what they do and anything logistically that we can help with on the form itself to make it easy for you as you add in your notes for the actual discussion. Let us know and reach out to us because we'll be happy to help streamline that piece for you.
Yeah, no, that's a great point too. Thanks, Kyle, for reminding me. So yeah, in regards to streamlining, that is something we can offer as a service. So because there are some individuals on campus that supervise double digits or more. So for them, that is a lot to fill out each form. And so some of those services we can offer. I think Michelle's, is your hand up? Is that what that is? That little icon, I think. Go ahead, Michelle.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask your thoughts on, you had mentioned earlier that, hopefully we started this year with really clear expectations and people knew, how they would be evaluated within a year. And I think that's true. But I know at least for myself, everything, of course, completely got thrown out the window. And expectations were really just, what is the job that's in front of you, and you got to get it done. And I feel like for a lot of our folks, that was also the case because we had to pivot so quickly in order to deliver services safely. So when I think about expectations, I'm not totally sure beyond just, were you flexible and did you get stuff done? That's my expectation. How do I sort of navigate that? Yeah.
No, that's a great, I think it goes back to the empathy grace piece. I think you being closest to your employees, what does your tummy tell you, right? So again, going back to, and this was the last point on my slide, which is a great transition. Give credit for adaptability this year. Give credit to your employees who have made that leap from the lily pad to the island, right? Like, just the fact that they are hanging in there, that they're still able to complete most of their stuff. Maybe it's 80% of their stuff. They didn't have a computer for the first month that they went remote. Their internet was crappy, and their kids were playing on Xbox, and they cut out of meetings. Those are things we can't control, right? And so really, when you look at the employee, and you, I think as supervisors will know your employees, right? You're closest to them. Does that make sense in a normal world? Would that have happened? Probably not, right? So giving credit for adaptability and grace and giving some of that leeway is why it's important this year than last year, why it's different and what that looks like. So there's not going to be a blanket that goes across all of campus to say, here's the expectations, because it's just so different from job to job, right? We have custodians that are still on campus. We've got people that can't work on campus. Well, they have to do the job, but maybe they have to be tested, and they found they had COVID. And now they were delayed and they didn't get that project done on time. So all of these factors come into play. And as a great leader and manager, again, going back to Simon Sinek, not just their output, but the human being, right? What have they done to contribute? Can you tell that they're trying? And for some, it may be more of a struggle and an adjustment to go remote than what we see as managers. And that's our next topic, is things to be mindful of that you're not seeing below the surface. And so I hope I kind of answered that question, but in some way, Michelle, it's not a black or white. And I think that's what makes these conversations difficult in the world that we're living in, because all of this is kind of gray right now. How long we're off of campus? When do we go back? How does this affect their performance? Am I getting a raise? All these questions are still things that sometimes we don't know, but what are things we can control? And you as supervisors have the greatest opportunity to influence your employees in a positive way.
Yeah, well, we had another.
And if you haven't, go ahead.
I was gonna say, we had another question that came in, was overcoming frustrations as it relates to CEC, 2 years without CEC, and it not being meaningful. So I guess I can answer this question for whoever asked it. Basically separating CEC from the evaluation and just having conversations. Employees want feedback, so providing them feedback and separating it from CEC. If we get CEC, great, but employees still need the feedback of how they're doing. I don't know if that answers this individual's question or not.
Yeah, and please unmic if it doesn't, and we have some time at the end of the slides as well to answer some of your questions. But if it fits here, we'd love to interject. And did we miss any other chats in the chat box? I saw some coming up on my phone as I was talking, colleagues. So let me know, Tiffany or Denise, if I missed one.
We had a request.
If not, go ahead.
We had a request for where the forms are found, so we put that in the link as well. So we'll get the link out there.
Awesome.
Yeah, please visit the website for sure. I'll let Kyle introduce the next slide, and I think this is a great time to have a smile cracked on your face. So hopefully it brings a smile to your face. I know it did me. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Kyle.
no, great video. I think you guys will find it funny about not judging too quickly. So I'm going to go ahead and play it right now and get your thoughts on it.
Look at the cute dog.
I found it funny. Abel, this is a video that you found. Why did you like it? Why did you think that this was something that was going to relate to the evaluation setting?
In all honesty, I was just surfing the web and I found that. So I don't know. I thought, no, there is a reason I put it in here. I saw many of you smile, which was the goal there. I think what this points out is sometimes when we're in these positions of doing performance evaluations, we have one perspective. Like we're standing from one angle and looking at our employees, right? And I think sometimes the employees' intentions are pure and they truly wanted to do something right or wanted to finish a project or trying, but it just didn't happen and they dropped the ball, right? But from a different perspective, it may look horrible. It may look like a bad situation. Perspective, that was really inappropriate, right? That was really whoa. But from his perspective, he was just trying, there was nothing wrong, right? And so I think it comes back to, again, setting those expectations, having those conversations. If someone's not coming to meetings, point it out and let them know. It is expected that I need you on those meetings. Do they know what's expected of them? From their perspective, they may be thinking that everything's fine, right? But more importantly than that, there's lots going on underneath the layer of water that we see from our relationship is only professional, right? A lot of times we only see the able side of HR, right? But there's a lot more to people below the ice than we can see or that they show us. And how does that play into the empathy and evaluation piece? And Kyle will give some real life examples in that in the next slide.
Yes, Abel, great example. And using, Zoom, for me, coming from Ada County, using WebEx, using Zoom was new for me. I think most of us understand how to use it now, but for the longest time, I couldn't figure out how to start a meeting or how to create a meeting. So are we penalizing it for anybody that, is unable to catch up to understanding how to use our equipment? Are we penalizing anybody for keeping their camera off during a meeting? For a lot of us in HR, we have noon meetings. So my camera might be off for a few minutes so I can eat lunch. Or I might be cooking for my kids while they're on their lunch break and I'm snacking down something. But I'm paying attention. I know what's going on. But maybe my camera's off because I don't want to see you guys. I don't want you guys to look at me chow down a hamburger. Are we penalizing anybody for having unreliable internet connection? My internet connection for the longest time, I have 3 kids doing online school. My wife's working from home. And today I'm using my hotspot on my phone to ensure that we don't get kicked off this meeting today because I know my bandwidth is a little bit slow. So, really a lot of that stuff's out of my control. Are we holding people accountable for things that, are really out of their control? We like to call that in the HR world harmless. We're holding people harmless to things that we just can't prevent from happening, such as day care closures or school closures due to COVID-19. So be mindful of things that are out of your employees' control. Another thing, understanding our approved leaves, Families First Corona Response Act, FFCRA, and Families Medical Leave Act, FMLA, and ADA, Americans with Disabilities Act, and furloughs have all had some kind of effect on employees throughout the campus. So understanding that when we have time that is dedicated to help employees, whether it be coronavirus or something medically related, we're staying away from those conversations when we're doing our performance evaluations. And we want to make sure that, what's coming from HR that has been approved is not being mentioned in the conversations, whether they've been gone for a long time or they've been gone for, a couple of days. So we want to make sure that you guys understand that those type of harmless activities should not be discussed in the evaluation process this year. And a lot of us are wearing many hats. You know, like I discussed earlier, a lot of us are teaching our kids. I can't remember how to do fractions with my fourth grader. And, you know, I'm spending a lot of time with her, making sure that she's getting up to speed with her work. In addition to running Zoom sessions like this, in addition to cooking during their lunch break and making sure that I'm taking care of myself as well. So we're wearing a lot of hats, and it's not just me, Abel's doing the same thing. So the perception of, you know, Kyle is not available, or he doesn't respond quickly enough. Understand that Kyle is probably managing multiple loads, including, you know, his workload. So, you know, it's a balance that I think is new for a lot of us in these situations. And, you know, we're going to discuss here in a second with Abel the perception versus reality. The perception is, oh, we're not available, we're not doing our job properly. But the reality is there's a lot of things in the layer, like Abel mentioned. And this slide here shows the multiple layers underneath the iceberg that we just can't see. So Abel, you want to explain the iceberg pick a little bit and kind of how that perception and reality piece ties into empathy as well?
Yeah, I think this is an important note to be mindful of from your perspective as supervisors. You know, again, I don't always have my camera on, and I'll tell you why. I don't have enough rooms in my house for a dedicated office, and so I have a fairly large bedroom, but I have my desk in my bedroom, and wouldn't you know it, I share a bedroom with my spouse, and she has to get dressed sometimes and go do things, so I have to turn my camera off, right? So I think some of those things that we talk about, whether it's Zoom, having issues with Zoom, or that maybe they're late to every meeting, it seems like they're slacker. They're just having issues with their Wi-Fi because their kids are playing Xbox or watching Netflix all day, and it's taking up the bandwidth. Things are out of our control. But the perception is, sometimes we say perception is reality, and sometimes it's just perception and it's reality. And so I think in this case, we have to be mindful of, well, what I see above the ice is what I see, but below that, like I said, like Kyle said, maybe they're wearing many hats. Maybe they're now got 3 kids that are on Wi-Fi doing schoolwork because their schools are shut down. Maybe they got to go pick up their kid because there was a COVID issue and they have to jump off a meeting. And so there's all these layers. And as human beings, we all have layers, right? This isn't just COVID-19. We have emotional levels, we have spiritual well-being levels, lifestyle behaviors. And so some of that stuff is going to be coming up to the surface and be agitated. Sorry about that. Did I lose you?
I can hear you, Abel.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Again, there's a great example. There's a great example of my kids on Netflix. So things are going to be agitated more because of the COVID-19. And so I think it's just a great example. So again, I guess what I'm saying is, let's assume the best in people, right? Let's assume that the people are trying their best. Again, to Michelle's point, there's not always clear expectations, but before you mark a 2 on that form or a 1, keep these things in mind, right? And have the conversation. I think that's what we're saying. Again, we're not saying empathy is a free class. We're not saying that you're going to give them a 3, even though they haven't done anything this year. We're not saying that. But we're just saying, make sure you have that perspective, that lens on. I think I covered anything else. Did you have anything else on this slide, Kyle?
No, I think you did a great job. I think, what we'll do next is we'll transition into kind of the empathy theme coming from a well-respected member of campus, Matt Neese, who's been an expert and a great resource to HR during this pandemic and really advising us, what the empathy theme really means for us, not only in HR, but, campus-wide. So we're going to show you guys a quick clip. This session that we have here, and we'll send out to you guys at the end of our session today during our recap email. This is a 5-minute video, but we're going to show you guys just a quick 1 minute and 30 seconds of it towards the middle. So just hang tight while I get to the actual time that I want you guys to witness, and we'll go from there.
For me, When it comes to applying my knowledge of empathy, there's a really great framework that helps me keep in check. On one end of the spectrum, there's what we call cognitive empathy. This is when I understand cognitively what's going on for another person emotionally, but I don't have my own emotional connection to that experience and therefore don't care enough to do anything about this understanding. On the other end of the spectrum, there's emotional empathy. This is when I'm connecting so much emotionally with my perception of what the other person is feeling that I lose myself in a moment. I become flooded with my own emotions in an attempt to align with the other person that I'm unable to be helpful in that situation. And then in the middle, there's what we call compassionate empathy, which, as you might expect, is a healthy blend between the first two. Based on my working knowledge of this person's life, when I'm feeling compassionate empathy, I have enough information to infer what they are likely experiencing. I have enough emotional connection to this person and their circumstances to have the desire to help. And because I'm staying grounded in my own identity, I'm able to be moved by this experience and the ability to compassionately or empathically support this person. So I know it can seem like a daunting.
Again, this video will be available as we send our recap email here the next couple of days to you all. But I mean, he does a great job in 5 minutes explaining, what empathy is and how to apply it, and how it fits in, our theme of, the evaluation. So we appreciate Matt's time and effort on giving us, his insight. We wanted a thought partner across the campus that truly believed in kind of what our messaging is, conveying this year. And, sometimes when in HR, you didn't want to hear, HR doesn't have all the answers, and nor do we want to pretend as if it's only our way of doing business. So Matt was a great resource to us in HR to ensure that we have that empathy piece coming from a different area of campus other than HR. Abel, am I missing anything from that?
No, I think you hit it on the head. A lot of what we're talking about isn't new by any means. There's research done about it. There's articles written about it. There's companies that have adopted it. And I think Matt is just another great thought partner. This year, it seems like even more so than ever that he's given some great insights as to your well-being as a person, right? Again, going back to Simon, more than just the output, but the individual, the human being. So I think he does a great job about doing that. And I think that leads us right into kind of some of our final slides. And when we talk about the well-being of a person, we're also talking about the mental health for that person during this pandemic. And I'll kick that back to Kyle for that. Yeah,
absolutely. Another piece of our empathy theme is understanding, life struggles. And, data right from the CDC website, according to the CDC, the COVID-19 pandemic has been stressful for a lot of people. Fear and anxiety about a new disease and what could happen can be overwhelming and cause strong emotions in adults and children. Public health actions such as social distancing can make people feel isolated and lonely and increase stress and anxiety. Ultimately, this can affect work. Stress during an infectious disease outbreak can sometimes cause the following, and I could touch on these myself as real life examples. Fear and worrying about your own health or the health of your loved ones, your financial situation, a loss of support services that you rely on, changes in sleep or eating patterns, difficulty sleeping or concentrating, worsening chronic health problems, worsening mental health conditions, and sometimes the increased use of tobacco and alcohol or other substances. For me, my daughter plays competitive soccer, so it's really year round for us. So as she goes to her indoor games on Saturdays, we know that there's a risk, right, involved when we're around other people, especially those that are playing sports. So as I'm driving, I know that I have a potential risk of my daughter and my family getting COVID. And it's something I think about every single time we're driving to her game. But I recognize too, she needs to be active. My son's in Cub Scouts, which is great, but he's also gained a little bit of weight because he's not as quite active as my daughter is. So we have all these different things that we're thinking about. And yes, we are involved in some higher risk activities, but it doesn't mean that I'm not thinking about, the possibility of what could happen later on. Maybe a teammate may rub her eye the wrong way on accident and scratch somebody in the game. So there's things that we're thinking about and stuff that I've never thought about before up until April of this year. My anxiety sometimes kicks in, but that's the reality of the infectious disease. And go ahead, Dave.
Too, Kyle. Sorry, I'd add too, for me personally, I've got kids and similar to ages and Kyle, and we talk about this a lot, but even changing in sleep patterns, again, my office is in my bedroom. So sometimes that's not good for me because I'm working more than I probably ever have, and separating that from work life, but home life balance is important. And sometimes that can bleed over. So also, we talk about, the eating patterns. I know that by the time I get back to work, I'm going to need to get some new slacks. I don't think any of my pants will fit. So I think all of that bleeds over to the individual as we talk about that and how that affects their output, right? Their work and their job every day that they're working. So I think those are great transitions, great thoughts there.
Absolutely, Abel. And like I said, and we're going to speed things up because I know we have time. We want to leave time for some questions, but employees and staff members here on campus are having those same worries that Abel and I are having. During this time, is it appropriate for us to show grace? I think the empathy piece should be inserted here, right? As a manager, it's our job to provide the tools such as like EAP and other programs to ensure that the employees have the right tools in place to succeed in their position. So as we start to wind down, Abel will give us a little bit of an update on what's to come next in HR when we are discussing evaluations.
Yeah, thank you so much. So just to wind down, we have 2 more slides here. So we'll leave one of those slides for opening up the questions here. What's on the horizon for us on campus and in HR, and what we have cooking in the crock pot. So we really want to move towards having more frequent check-ins throughout the year with our employees. That's something that we're looking at. I think the reason behind that, there's a couple. It builds more meaningful conversations, opportunities to develop people, have those discussions, and building trust and transparency if you're connecting with somebody more frequently. It's also, it gives the employee real time opportunities for feedback and recognition, right? I used to say this a lot. I say this to my colleagues. When I was younger, we had a dog that would chew on my chair and ruin my shoes in my closet. And I'd find the shoes like 3 days later or a week later, and then I go and kick the dog. And the dog's like, I don't know what I did wrong, right? Like, so if we have that feedback and that meaningful discussion in real time, it provides more insight and gives the opportunities for employees to change their behaviors or to improve, but also gives them opportunities to feel that gratitude and that recognition when they do something right. Tell them then, hey, you did a great job on that. Thank you so much for doing that. That helped our team, rather than waiting for the end of the year to say something that happened maybe months ago. So I think having those frequent check-ins are going to help with all of those things, and it'll be a great byproduct of the evaluation, increasing the effect of the evaluation. But also we want to provide more innovative resources on what those check-ins should look like. So providing more videos and recordings of what a check-in should look like and a real life demonstration of what maybe it shouldn't look like. Some tips for managers and employees on both sides of the fence as to how to have a better conversation and build that trust and transparency in those one-on-ones. And then also just some logistics of building more templates and other things that you can use to help set goals and drive that discussion and help them professionally develop, get them to a place they need to be in their career. So that's kind of what we're looking on the horizon. We'd love any input, any feedback any of you have, please send it our way, and we'd love to have those discussions. With the last 6 minutes, we wanted to leave this open for you guys to answer or ask any questions that maybe we didn't miss. We did have a form to go out. Hopefully you guys were able to see that, but we did have a pre-submitted question link that you could submit some questions to us, and we were going to leave some time for us to answer those questions. We did have, I think we had 2 questions submitted, and so I'll let Tiffany or Denise, I think you have those questions. If you could maybe read it or summarize the question, then maybe we can answer those for them.
Hi, Abel. This is Denise. One of the questions was about student employees, and I would just encourage everyone to treat student employees the same as other employees, and make sure you're giving them evaluations and feedback so that they can understand the process when someday they become a real employee, and they know what's expected of them. Setting those clear expectations is important of all employees.
Thank you so much. And then Tiffany, did you have one other question about on the pre-submitted question? Did you see that?
Sorry, Abel, I did not, but I'll make sure it gets answered when we send out this web.
Okay. Yeah, no problem. So I think we only had 2 pre-submitted questions, so we'll be able to answer those for sure on our email recap. With the other 4 minutes, did anybody else want to unmic or put in the chat box, whatever you feel comfortable doing about anything that's maybe on your mind regarding the evaluations or we didn't maybe cover that you would like us to?
This is Karen. I'd like to ask a question about sort of reframing expectations during COVID, looking forward to fiscal year or to January 2021. And I'm wondering if HR has done this at all with setting expectations with employees, and if you have any sample documentation of that.
Yeah, that's a great question. I know that our team is kind of, Tiffany, again, does our one-on-ones pretty regularly, and we have those discussions. Tiffany, you may have, and maybe you don't, but maybe we could create some as to what that format looks like and document it for distribution of what your approach is or thoughts. Let me know. Please share your thoughts.
I guess just to ask a little more in depth, are you wanting how to set expectations as far as SMART goals, just as far as how to do it, or just the conversation as a whole?
I think both. I mean, I think we've been looking at, how do we really know during COVID what all of our employees are doing it. I think it's easier with direct reports, but as a group, it gets more difficult. And so how do we have that conversation with people, come up with something that's reasonable, and then what is the document at the end of the day, so that we've reframed it in a way that everybody's on the same page?
Yeah, for sure. We can get that to you, Karen, and I will share with this team as well. So SMART goals is just where they're specific, they're measurable, they have time limits to them, so we can get that information out, and then also how to document for both the employee and the supervisor. For sure, we can do that for you, Karen.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and we'll make sure to include all of these, all this information, the things that we're sending to these individuals, include it to everybody, so that if you have the same question, we can share that with you. With the last 2 minutes, and I hope we're answering all your questions, but we'll get more. The last 2 minutes as we wind down, Kyle, if you want to go to the next slide, I just want to personally thank all of you for the effort that you're already putting in. And I think it's important in these trainings to do so. Many of you are doing a great job, and I'm sure all of you are doing a great job in your own way. And some of you are probably saying, I'm doing a great job, but I've learned some things that I might take back. And that's great. We hope that it's been inspiring, but also we just want to let you know that we appreciate you and are grateful for your work. Without you, life would be a lot harder for both our employees and our university, all the work you do within your own college and department. There's a cool quote I like to say often, is you lift where you stand. And it's harder to lift a piano and move it with 1 or 2 people and do it all at once, rather than everybody do their part and circle around the piano and lift, 2 inches up. So for me, you guys are all lifting where you stand, and we really, truly appreciate your work you're doing, both the seen and unseen. And so thank you for your time today. Thanks for coming. We'll be respectful of your time, and we will go ahead and send this recap out along with the recording training and some other materials that we've had that have been asked today. Kyle, did you have anything else?
No, you said it perfectly, man. Thank you all for joining us today. It's 11 o'clock, and we hope you guys enjoy the rest of your week.